All right, so I contacted the 3D printer online and the store on eBay, and it looks like they're going to send me the parts. Lucky for me, I had another one in the box that was brand new that does have all the parts. So I guess that's the importance of doing an inventory right out of the gate. I'll get that squared away for next time. So these were the 3 parts I was missing. And we're going to go ahead and get this ball rolling again. This is the end stop. We'll just put it right where it goes, and we'll tighten it up later. And we've got a bracket. Again, it's routed out on the back side, and it only fits one way. The screws are going to go from the other side. The little bag of M416s. Put a little dope on it. A washer. Feed it through. See, I added a new artillery shell, or a tank shell actually, to the mix. One that says 75G in the background there is actually Sherman tank round from World War II. It's 3D printed. I got to figure out if it's actually going to turn into a whiskey stash or not. I got to go to the local liquor store. They always get a giggle when I go in there. And measure their bottles with my micrometer and try to stuff them in the old artillery shell. Okay, so now we've got our Z-axis tensioner, and just unspin the T-bolts. We just want to snug it up so it doesn't fall off as we're tinkering with it. And now we'll grab our belt. And now I got the hiccups. Feed the belt under the hot end. It'll just roll right over. Once you get it through, you can slide it down. I'm sure there's about 6 ways you can do this. Tinker a little bit with the old Allen wrench to feed it through and around. On the extruder side, you got to get it up over the timing cog, the timing wheel. Reach through with some little pinchers, pull it through, tuck it back under the wheel, pull it through. And this belt, for the most part, is going to ride in between the extrusion, so you got to watch as you go to make sure that you're aligned correctly and that belt isn't getting chewed up. Okay, flip it back over, and we're just going to drop it right in the tensioner, or in the hot end. Okay, grab the other side of the belt, give it a little snag. Can help to give it a pinch, and if that tight, it typically means something's a little off. So we'll check both ends and make sure it's right where it's supposed to, and it's not on that end, so that's going to give me what I need. And it doesn't have to be super tight, but it'll actually bite in a tooth or two. And now that's assembled. Okay, so then we pick it up, looking to see if the cable is twisted, because that'll cause you some pains later in life if it is. So we'll go with it like that, and we'll roll it on there. Okay, so it's too tight to go on right now. We'll work those eccentric nuts, pull them back a little ways. One here and one here. You don't want these wheels too tight or they'll gouge out. And they'll roll improperly. And basically you're looking to get using the eccentric nut, the wheels as loose as you can get them, and then we just pop it on. If we got everything right, there we go. Okay. Not too tight. It's pretty good. It'll probably loosen up when we get the upright put on there. So that's your, should have 4 remaining heavier bolts. Those are, I think they gave me some spares there. Okay, little dope on there. Get our wrench. And again, you want to start one nice and easy. Get it close, go over to the other side. Get it started. And you're going to want to line up the extrusion so it's flush on the edges and on the face, and that'll get it as square as you can get it. This one, I'm seeing a little bit of shiny there, but it feels flush, so I'm going to go with it. And you just snug them up. Okay, that looks pretty good. And light's pretty good. We're going to go back to like step 2 because I like to jump around. That's just what I do. And we'll mount the Z limit switch and the Z axis motor. For that, you'll use your M5. Oh, that's the wrong bag. M5 8mm long and M5T lock nuts. And these lock pretty well on their own, so I would not worry about. That is absolutely wrong. There we go. It's the M14P. These are have beveled heads on them, so they sink in. So you put them in like so, making sure you orient the lock nut so it will lock correctly. I got it fixed. Every now and again these come and they won't align. I'll post the fix for all the Ender 3 stuff down below in the comment or the notes section. Orient them up, slide them in. Turn this around. And then you have your lead screw. Now it's important that you get the lead screw as square to the frame as you can possibly get, and that's a challenge sometimes. So one of the fixes they have is to loosen these screws, and those are super tight. So I loosen them quite a ways. I've never had them come undone. And then I get it so that lead screw will kind of drop in there, and it should be level with the top and spin pretty freely. So as we tighten these lock nuts up, you may see it tension up, and if that's the case, then we'll either have to go to Thingiverse and print out a spacer, or I've been known to throw a it's the wrong side, the base of a stringing test at the problem, and that usually fixes it. So tighten that up. We'll see how that thing is still spinning freely down there on the lead screw. So this is pretty good alignment, really. So we'll tighten these up. And that's in. Should be able to push down on either side equally, and it should roll for you. Of course, in that case, I didn't tighten the lead screw into the base, but I'll sink it now. Get that tight. Get that tight. Okay, so now should go up and down with a little force, not too much, and things are looking good. Okay, we'll put this on for the third time. And the nice thing about this is it's got a stopper on it, so you just put it down there as far as you need to. On occasion you may have to lift it if the hot end is hitting the bed, you can lift it a little bit. Just know as you go up, you lose build volume. We'll snug it with a short end. Okay, so Z-axis motor's on. We're going to take this opportunity to throw a little white lithium grease right around the deal, maybe on the every now and again here. Don't get carried away, but that'll keep it riding smooth, and we'll just run it through, spread that grease around. And it looks pretty good. Okay, let's tighten the X-axis belt. Pretty simple. We got it on there. We just give it a little pull. You don't want it too tight. And you want to be looking to make sure that the lock nuts actually engage and roll up. Now, if you experience any Z-axis binding, you can loosen the two screws in here from the back side. There's one over here and one here, and you can turn this just a little bit. So as you look, if your wheels are spinning freely and it's set square, you're either not tight enough, so you got to adjust the eccentric nut. And if you tighten the eccentric nut and one of the wheels still spins freely, then you know that you need to loosen this and try to turn it a little bit here or there. And you don't want that too tight. You don't want those wheels to dig too far in. Okay, so feels pretty good. The motors are pretty torquey, so they should be able to push through just about whatever you've got going on. Most of the assembly is complete. We're going to have to put the control panel on, which I have somewhere around here. Bear with me. Okay, so for the front, they give you silver screws, and I like mine with to match. This goes in the first port, so the closest port, and we'll go in here, dig out some heavier screws. I think they're running M5s. They're a little shorter, or they're the shortest ones that I have anyway. And line this guy up. And the control panel is on. Most of the assembly is complete. Now we're going to go through and connect all the wiring. So let's turn it around over here. All of the cables in the back are marked clearly. The power cable, you can't miss it. It's yellow, red, black wires. You just want it to hang low and out of the way. There seems to be a little bit of issue with wires bumping, especially as the printer gets to height. I haven't come up with a good solution with that for that yet, but I'm working on it. Every one of these is marked with a letter, so I have the X in my hand. The bigger one of them is the X-axis motor. and the one marked E is for the extruder motor. And you can get them backwards, and when you go through your test, you'll know. And then the end stop is the little guy, and it's in this hole quite a ways. Get them snug. Okay, all the cables are assembled. Do a quick little look. We'll mount our filament holder on the top. This is a nice clean little package. I like how it's all in one unit. You can pick it up and move it without disturbing the filament. No particular right or wrong to where that's at, but you do have to use the right wrench. Make sure your lock nuts turn and engage. And look at the parts laying on the table. I don't have anything extra laying around. So we'll put in some of our add-ons. So when you first print with this, it will cut off a little bit of filament and it'll fall in this fan hole here. So there are several options on Thingiverse, but this is the one I use. I'll reference it down below. Unscrew these two screws. And this will keep that fan from eating up all that filament. I've done it for every one of my enders. I have 4 over there working right now. Oh, that's a challenge. Now we got to go in after the screw that fell in the fan hole that I'm trying to prevent things from falling inside of. 3 screws on the top of this thing to remove it. And remember, as you move this back and forth, there's our Z-axis end stop, and I think it was inside the box because I didn't see it hanging loose. I'll have to re-look at the video. That goes on like so. And if you're running an ender, you're going to want to do this every single time you go. Should have 3 of these little screws hanging around. It's made to slide a little bit left and right because they don't always make these things very precise. Third screw back in. It's a little longer because it's going in a little deeper. Okay, so that's fix number 1. Let's see, that cable keeps grabbing. So this is the anti-snag for the Ender 3. It goes on this back plate. You just show you what I'm doing. Pop that back plate off. Snap that on. and that will help us with some of the cables snagging as we go. And the last must-have upgrade is the cable holder, or the filament holder, and it keeps the filament from getting it at an extreme angle. So now we're going to break out some black filament. Most of my prints I do in white. I find it's most consistent. And I end up painting and making the 3D printed artillery shells you see in the background there on the table. So I got a little project I'm working on. It's going to require some black. I don't mind printing in black. But I kind of find what works and stay with it. So we're going to grab this filament here, give it a snip, get the goodies out of the way. We'll just feed it right there and let it sit for a minute. So now we're ready to power this up. I'll step back around here. See what we get. Looks like it's booting just fine. I don't know how well you can see that. And we're going to go through our tests. So the first thing we want to do is go to prepare, and we're going to test all our axes. So when you go to move 10 millimeter, you can move your X and Y. So I just told it to go all the way to the end and come all the way back. You're looking for irregular movement or anything that's going to get in the way and cause troubles. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing with the Y. And this is where this cable issue, we're going to have to come up with a fix for that. Might have to do some design and infusion. But I think there are some goodies. I might be able to solve it with some zip ties. But X and Y work just fine. When it comes to Z, you can only do that with 1 millimeter settings. So now, for some reason, the Z isn't moving. And of course, I'm on the spot, so I'm not on my game, and I didn't connect the Z-axis motor. So it's okay to do while it's on. In my experience, I haven't had a problem with it yet. So let's look here. Now we're going to go, and then we found the one that was hanging out from the bottom. And I guess this is what making's about, is getting a little better as you go. So let's go back to prepare. Now we should get some action. Okay, so Z's going up and it's going down. And I hadn't auto-homed it because we're going to make a fix to the hot end real quick. So I've got a couple write-ups on this, but before we do that, let's go to temperature under control, and we're going to heat up the bed. I do most of my printing at about 65. We're going to test this fan on the side here. The fan here will go anytime the printer is on and powered. The fan over here only turns on when it's told to, and it blows directly on the hot end. It turned on and it worked fine. It's spinning. So we can go ahead and turn that back off. It says don't touch the heated bed, but I always do. It's definitely warming up. And you can see from the main screen what it's set to and what the temperature is. And as you see it blink, if you see a blinking light on there, it'll tell you it's heating up. So now we're going to move this hot end over, and we're going to heat this nozzle up to right in the 165 or 180. And so, Maker Steve fix right out of the gate. Let's clip these off. These are junk. A lot of times these zip ties are too tight. They'll cause the filament to bind. And I print S-clips that I usually have on hand, but I can't find any right now, so we'll go into that. I will definitely link to it. But what we're going to do is we're going to make sure this ptfe or Teflon tubing is completely seated, because it's an issue, and sometimes it's not cut square. And when that's the case, you'll get gaps in between the hot end and the ptfe, and that's no good. So you want to inspect to make sure that is square. And I don't like Creality's pressure connectors, either side, the one for the extruder or the hot end. But this is another idea I got from looking from a gentleman on YouTube. And basically, he didn't do it when it's hot. I've been doing it when it's hot. I tend to like it. It boils a little bit in there. It's kind of exciting. This is WD-40 Specialist Dirt and Dust Resistant Dry Lube. It's a ptfe spray, and it's good for 450 degrees. I had to run around all over the place to find this stuff. But this adds a dry lubricant to ensure you can insert the ptfe tubing the whole way. Now, this one slides pretty good, but there's a lot of times they don't. But we'll see what we get. So we're going to put this guy back on there, and if there's any gap between the nozzle, the top of the nozzle, and the ptfe tubing, you're going to get globs of filament that are going to mess up the volume when you enable retraction, especially. Snug that up. And this is going to go in quite a ways, so we're going to inspect both sides. I have a pneumatic cutter that I use. I'll put a link to it. But I'm going to inspect that they look like they're at 90-degree angles. And they're cut squarely. So we're going to slide this in the top, and we're going to drive it down to the bottom. And this one went in well. And you can basically feel it in there when you got it seated. It goes in quite a ways. So if it goes in just a smidge and it stops, you're not there, and you're going to have all kinds of problems. Your hot end's going to plug, and you're going to be nothing but frustrated with your prints. Because it will not extrude the correct amount of filament. Overall, looks pretty good. We'll hook this guy up. I also have cable clips, because the ones that come from Creality tend to let go, and your ptfe will just push out, and then you'll get a big spool of filament on the backside. That's no good. So I know I've got one of the cable clips around here and one of the lock nuts, or lock fittings. Okay, so this is what I'm talking about. I print them out probably, I don't know, by the 10s or so, and they clip on pretty tightly. And for our purposes, we'll just, you put one on the cable, and probably 3 or so inches up from the hot end, you clip one of these guys on. And this one needs a little razor blade action so it'll clip properly. I've got my helper Leela following me around. She's extra cleaning today. Apparently she knows she can get famous. And we'll just route that out. Make a nice clean clip. Put it on there, and when you got it right, it'll snap, the ptfe will snap in. Okay, now what I'm going to do for the short term is just loosely add a couple of zip ties, but you don't want it to pinch that ptfe cable at all. I've been through tons of hot end frustration. Okay, so let's go ahead, we'll turn it off, reinitialize, feed some filament in. We're going to go to prepare and preheat PLA. And we're just going to make sure some comes through nice and easy. And so your plastic's not going to move until the temperature's up about 185 or so. And your extruder is not going to move even if you tell it to, until it's up over above that temperature as well. It's a safety feature. So we're going to go to move axis, move 1 millimeter, and we're going to move the extruder, and we're just going to see that it's rolling and extruding, and it looks pretty good to me. And then we're going to shove a little through, because that's what I do to make sure it's going well. And if you really want to see it go, you can heat it up, keep the temperature up to 205 or so, and that's enough to get most PLA moving pretty quick. And bed's heating, hot end's heating. You'll see the tip blink, and when it gets up to temperature, it'll fill in that hole, and this is extruding pretty nicely. So now we're ready to level this thing, but we don't want to get carried away right away. We're going to do a couple quick checks to make sure it's level. So I don't know if you can see that. I'll move you to it a little better. And you're not going to be able to see it. So we'll just accept that, and you'll have to follow along with me. Okay, so we got a 0.24. Surface of the table is 0.25. So the top frame is pretty square. Now we'll put it on the z-axis. And we're looking to get about the same numbers on it as well. What's a little off, you can usually do a little adjustment. we can find our wrench that I've got hidden right here, and we'll just try to see if we can get that closer to the mark. Lot of discussion back and forth about whether all this has to be level. I've got OCD. It's what I do. All that needs to be level is the bed and the x-axis gantry, and if you have that, you're going to be okay for sure. So we're going to go down here and we're going to bring this down quite a ways and suck up some of the height of the spring, because we don't want the hot end to mar our print surface. I really like what Creality has done with this print surface. The removable beds on the newer Enders that I have are awesome. You just clip them on, you unclip them. I did order a magnetic, so I'll go through the challenge of removing this surface that's glued, removing the glue with some alcohol, and then putting the magnetic surface on, and then the magnetic build plate. But they're flexible and prints pop right off. These tend to get stuck right to the surface, and then when you go to remove them, it can damage that surface. So nobody likes that. So we're going to call that level. We're going to go to prepare. We're going to auto home this thing. Paying attention to the cables. And it'll go down. I'm going to go over to my trusty printer and steal its food. And grab a sheet of paper to do the level. While that's going on, I'm going to rip off one of these little clips. And I'm going to clean it up. Careful not to cut your fingers if you're doing a lot of X-Acto work. I spend a lot of time trimming up my artillery shells. There's different thicknesses of these, and I don't have the thinner one printed. So now that we've got it at auto level, we're going to look and we're going to see how far we got to go down with that nozzle. And of course, yeah, I'm working on a hot printer. That's kind of what I like to do. So. And when you get the bed below the tip of the nozzle, now you know you can start to level it. So what I do as a cheat for me is I throw that on there and I level the bubble into the center, and I generally know at that point that the hot end is not going to scratch the surface when I set it off on its first print. This is a digital level that's been a pretty good one for me. Getting pretty close. Okay, we're close enough that we can probably move the tip around without hurting the print surface. I'll double check one more time, and of course as you adjust one side it throws off the others. And there we go. So using a piece of paper, you put it under the nozzle and you just work it just a little bit. I find if I'm printing a small print that my leveling surface, I will make it much closer to the inside. If you're doing a large print, you're going to have to level out to the four corners. These beds are often not as level as you'd like. On my CR10s, I go to mirrors, and I find that is pretty good. The problem is the print's really thick, and the fix for that is some canned air. You got a print that's stuck, or you can put the print in the freezer if you've got enough room in there. So, okay, we're going to go around the four corners. We'll stretch out a little bit, and we'll just bring it up to snug, where we get a little friction on the paper. We'll move our way around. The spring side usually gives you the most challenge because the spring is compressed a little more. It's got that strain relief snuck in with it. And you're just looking for it to grab. Just a little bit like so. You'll find your sweet spot as you go. Piece of paper is like 0.7 millimeters, and if you're printing with different size nozzle like a 0.2, you'll have to get it more friction between the nozzle and the paper. And you'll see I've gone around this thing a couple of times, and yeah, this bed isn't quite playing with level, but we're going to make it work. I find as I get going, leveling goes faster. I'm going to call that a win. And we're going to walk over here. Steal an SD card that I know has a stringing test on it. We'll put that in there. And we'll go to initialize SD card. And we're going to print from SD, and we're going to pull out the old basic streaming test. It's kind of my go-to for printing. I'll attach this cable up here, and we'll just watch. See if we start getting what we expect. Looks like it's a little tight, so I'll just work it off. But we're getting a good first surface. If you hear your extruder click, that means you're too tight. That's what this one's doing right now, so we'll give it a little breathing room. And I'm just adjusting just ever so slightly all the way around. Now I print with a brim on just about everything I do. I like the adhesion I get out of that. And it's black, so it's harder to see. But it seems to be printing okay. So we'll wait until this print's done. I'll come back, take a look at it, make sure it's meeting the mark, and we'll go from there. Talk to you in a bit.